Does she have a green light behind her?
I don't know. Yes, I do. I can hear myself.
Yeah, so Mel was one who approached this through the forum, and was perfect timing, and we had a breakfast basically simultaneously whinging and praising some projects, and it's a great fit to where we started about how to present data, how to work with data, how to bring it out and have that data be meaningful to the people who are using that service. So I'm not going to interrupt Mel at all and let her just crack on. Everyone, Mel Flanagan, please.
Thank you. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the custodians of our beautiful land and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Thank you all for coming, and I'm a storyteller, a maker, an information designer, creative director, and many things. And before I do anything in the world, I would love to know who's in the audience. So if anyone is a researcher, can you please raise your hand? Okay, any product designers? Service designers? Any developers? And any other BAs? Anyone else who wants to just shout out what they do if I haven't mentioned it? Ah, wonderful. Okay, all right, for data analytics, I'll take that, data, that's awesome. Any storytellers in the room? Okay, any content people in the room? All right, so what I wanted then was everyone to raise their hands. And the reason so if you can all raise your hands, people, because you're all content people. Thank you. So, Nook Studios, this is my little social enterprise, and all the work we do at Nook Studios is around social and environmental issues. So, in the deep, dark past, I came from theatre making. So I'm a theatre maker. I'm also a filmmaker. So these are some of the shows and projects that I've worked on, whether it be lots of different levels, lots of different roles, and often multiple roles. And I guess one of the things that is the level of bums on seats, engaging people, interaction design, whatever you kind of experience design, whatever you want to call it, that was such an essential part of what I was doing as a theatre and filmmaker. So understanding audiences and what their needs are and how to entertain them and how to get them there and make sure it's an awesome experience is kind of like in my DNA. The other thing that's in my DNA is like on Phantom, for example, we had no unsold seat for 3 years. So in a 1,200 seat theatre, that's quite a challenge. But that's the kind of level I've been used to working at when I kind of make media. As a producer, and that's what I used to be called before I got called many other things, one of my favourite things in the whole world was making theatre. And one of my favourite projects was a project called Don't Stare Too Much, and it was a physical musical comedy about romance and how to find it. And one of the great things about making theatre, which is a lot like software and a lot like product design and service design, is you're constantly getting that feedback from your audience. And when you're dealing with and designing a romantic comedy, hearing people laugh is kind of the way that you get to measure your success. So I've gone from designing theatre and producing theatre to actually making products and services. So when I kind of took all my skills from theatre and film into this kind of digital web world, I was really excited to find other people like me who went, oh, they're thinking about characters. They're thinking about, okay, what's the current state and where do people want to go? What's the goal? And so there's people like Donna, and there's also others like Nicole, which is you kind of go, people aren't kind of get that it's kind of messy at the beginning. And then you do all this stuff, and then you hopefully can talk to some people, and then you kind of do some more, and then you get it out there and you refine as you go, and it's this beautiful, awesome thing that becomes this messy thing that becomes something that people want to engage with. So I guess what I want to say to you is like the content designer as a thing is something that is kind of new. We've always been here. We've been called lots and lots of different things. Producer, writer, we get kind of creative director. I get called all sorts of stuff. And the thing that I kind of own more now and service designer, the thing I own really is actually content design, because I think it's the thing that really needs to be brought to the fore. And content design is more than words, and it's not a solo effort. So if you're looking for a content designer, you're not necessarily going to find just one person. You're probably going to need a team of really awesome people who can help you do the things that you need to do. And I'm just going to talk about the team of people that I work with. So I kind of like join the dots around a lot of stuff. I find people to come on teams. I join people together, collaborate. And a lot of the work we do now is sort of taking government services or taking information that's very, very complex and trying to simplify it for a very non-technical audience. And a lot of it's data storytelling. So storytelling's not necessarily, like I said, about words. Often it's like data. Like data is information, content's information. This information design thing is actually the thing that keeps the kind of world going around. As I think I mentioned, all the work we do at the Nook is around social and environmental issues. So a lot of the work we do is around transparency, anti-corruption, public participation, how we can get people more involved in our government decision-making and more involved in what's happening in their local communities. Making open is something you can have a look at. We're part of this global community, which is called the OGP, which is there's people from all over the world. And it was really great to see your talk, to see that in Milan, the interaction design in community is really about kind of access, making sure that information is accessible. This is my mob, or some of my mob. So there's a mixture of artists, illustrators, animators, product designers, service designers, strategists, web designers, and awesome visuals. So I just want to tell you a story about sort of usefulness and just take you through a couple of case studies. So in order to be useful, data needs a narrative, an audience, a purpose and context. And often what happens is when you don't give data that thing, this is what results. So back in 2010, the New South Wales government had a problem with coal seam gas. They hadn't been communicating what the hell was going on in our state in terms of what was happening. So this is the information experience people were having. They were going to a website which was directed for industry. They were looking at maps, not understanding what the hell was on the maps, misinterpreting this information and thinking that's where mining and production of coal seam gas was happening across all of New South Wales, which is actually not a thing. And so, of course, that was making people really angry and scared and incredibly emotional. The department was getting call after call of people really freaking out about the fact that something was going on in their local community. They had no information about what that meant. And so the other thing that was happening was people were trying to find things about like the documents associated to what was on that map. And coming to something like this, where it took them 12 clicks to get to the thing that they needed to get to if they knew the secret special code. And of course they didn't. So they thought the government was hiding something, but in fact, it was just badly designed. So the other thing that was really freaking people out is they didn't actually know what industry looked like. And so at the time, I'd been developing an interactive documentary series using some data and trying to explain what industry actually looked like. What does exploration look like? What does production look like? And I knew, what was going on in Queensland looked like this. And when, the government was selling, oh, it's just a little well and there's a cow and it's in a field, it's all fine. This is it. This is like the bird's eye view. And then that's actually what production looks like. Like they're not going to show you that photo because they don't want to freak people out. So that kind of helping people make informed decisions is actually the core element of what we do at the Nook. So in terms of where we were getting to was the government decided, realised they had a problem. I happened to be at an innovation event and they were like, can you please come and help us? And I was like, absolutely. But in order to do that, I want to bring a whole bunch of people with us because, I kind of know some of this stuff, but I don't know everything. And these are all the people who do. And so we need to take them on that journey. So I introduced participatory design into the New South Wales government back in 2012 during the making of this project. And we took over 200 people on that making journey with us. So I'm kind of just going to skim across the top of the kind of case study for this project. And we ultimately ended up making this, which is Common Ground. So what we did was we brought a whole bunch of data that was sitting in lots of different places and brought it together and made it meaningful to a community audience who was non-technical, didn't really know what all the crazy acronyms meant. We looked at what was the information they were actually really looking for. We took all of that geospatial information, put it onto a map, But rather than just taking something out of the box, actually put it together in terms of what are the different chunks and what are the filters that people are looking for. So we spent a lot of time talking to people about what is it that you want to find, what is it that you really need, what are you interested in. There's a whole bunch of contextual content here, such as where's mining happening in context to national parks. There's also the ability to look up your local area and go in and find out what's happening around you. This was all mobile first back in 2012. So the other thing about this project was that it is a collaborative project. It was agile. It was all of those buzzwords. And back in the day when it was very, very early days. And so I'll talk about that in a second, but it was really quite revolutionary on such a number of levels. And to the credit of the New South Wales government, they introduced a thing called open government back in 2011. Everyone thought open government was open data. And so what we did, and what I really wanted to do, was just embrace what open government really is and get to the heart of it, which is actually about helping people understand things and getting people to participate as well. So one of the really awesome things about Common Ground was the fact that we were bringing together a bunch of data and information from lots of different services into a form where it actually just made sense for people. So feel free, go see it, 6 years on. It's still alive and it's still out there, and we're hoping that Minister Dominello doesn't cut it in this recent trying to get rid of New South Wales government websites. But it's been well loved and well respected all over the world. So talking about data and story, one of the things that we do with data is we always have, whenever data appears anywhere in the work that we do, we always give it a little data dictionary that kind of travels with it. Because often the way to alienate people is to give them some information and not really help them understand what it actually means in the context in which it's been gathered. So, having that sort of little explainers is really important. I just wanted to give you a sense of sort of the project timeline for Common Ground, because there was about 20 people involved. I was sort of the creative director, I was the producer, I was the lead service designer, there was a whole bunch of stuff we were doing. And I had some amazing, and such an incredible team. We had Small Multiples doing the front end for us. I had my team like Cy Wright, and there's a whole bunch of awesome people who were working on this project. The thing that we did, which was, sorry, I'm going to use my pointer now, was content was always at the beginning for us. And that was something that was really kind of, the department kind of couldn't really get their head around, but we needed the data, we needed the content. So what we got at the beginning was actually a whole bunch of stuff, like hundreds of pages and just hundreds of data points, thousands of data points, and trying to make sense of that. So we used a lot of dummy content we were making at the beginning, but it was really awesome. It was back in the day when we made this, stakeholder engagement was not a thing, let alone user experience research. So we had some familiar faces. Katya, you'll see the back of her head there, if anyone knows Katya Forbes. She helped us out on that, and it was a really fantastic experience in terms of user experience research and the usual kind of must, should, coulds in terms of what people needed to do in terms of the transaction and things they were trying to find. But as a content storyteller maker, the thing that we usually do, and that's one of the things that I advise to get content designers in early, is not just about what the user journey is, it's also about what the information experience should be. And so what we were doing with all of our research interviews and whenever we spoke to people was trying to understand what things meant and how they explained it, the language that they used, and what they were trying to find. Invariably, people were finding this, and that's what they had to understand in order to understand what was happening in their local area and what companies were doing. So if anyone's ever read legislation, it's pretty wonky and it's pretty hard. And so what we did for Common Ground, and I'm a bit of a process princess, has to be said. Process storytelling is something I'm really passionate about. One of the things that we did was actually kind of go, okay, well, we need to tell the story about how mining and production happens in New South Wales, and really trying to help people identify like what their place in the decision-making process is, but also what do companies have to do? Like they are obligated to do community consultation at the beginning. They have to do the environmental documentation and research and assessments. And so all the way down to this section, which is the EIS, the environmental impact assessment stages, which is actually usually the first time that people hear about something happening in their local area or across the state. So when you think about it, there's 5 years that go by before it goes out to kind of public consultation. And it usually goes out for 45 days, which is why most people get really upset. And the only thing that's going to stop a project is if there happens to be a bandicoot that's about to become extinct, which is not good enough. So one of the biggest outputs for Common Ground was really this kind of notion of open process. And so by seeing the process end to end, it was the first time anyone in the government really understood what the hell the process was, interpreted legislation, but they could just connect to it. And lots of different departments are at different points in this process. And so internally, it was amazing for people outside. Everyone was like, I love it, it's great, it's fantastic. Internally in government, they were like, we finally understand where we fit in. So people could connect to it in a really powerful way. And as an engagement tool and a community engagement tool, it was a really powerful thing. The other thing that it did was the minister at the time was like, okay, so this is, I don't know how to use a pointer, but down here was, the system's broken, the process is broken. Clearly, it's not okay that 6 years goes by until people understand what's happening in their local area. So that green bit at the top, which is the second part of like the next iteration of that process, is that he went, well, we should really just create this extra phase where the government is responsible for telling people what we're deciding and whether, and having those discussions about whether it's an appropriate land use or not. So that was Common Ground. And that's kind of led us to this sort of open process movement, which is sort of something that we kind of like is part of an open government movement that we've really sort of inspired lots of other governments to kind of go on that journey of being open about their process, not just opening their data, but opening their process as well. So a lot of what we do is process and journey mapping, legislation and policy interpretation, and sometimes that's a process and sometimes it's not. Connecting, contextualising data. Like a lot of data is out there and people aren't using it, and so one of the reasons that we like to kind of like be able to put it into a process context or a journey context is actually helping people understand how to use that data and when it's being collected and who the owners are, but also being able to kind of feel connected to it. Tracking project life cycles is another thing, and following material and money flows is another. A lot of the work that we do around open government and anti-corruption is actually following the money, like where who is mining companies, what taxes and royalties are they paying, what minister are they paying off, what's their, depending on what country you're in, whether it be ag, whether it be mining, whether it be infrastructure, there's a lot going on. So one of the most recent projects using this sort of like open process is the templates we're developing, which is really to kind of help different countries all over the world be open about their processes, particularly with mining and production, because we know that there's a standard, there's a pattern that everyone has to go through. And so this is sort of the basis of a tool that we're developing, which is to help people make their own process pathways, whether it be a poster or an interactive version or a way to just track a project and process. So often what we're doing with this is kind of flipping the journey. So rather than looking at who the actors are, looking at sort of how we, involve actors or the different characters that are involved, but place them in a process. And so it's a really fun part of being a content designer is kind of going, well, what is it that people actually really need? Like, how can we interpret this in different ways, and how can we make it really useful and meaningful for people to be able to kind of understand what's happening, but also improve their processes, improve what's happening in their local communities. So the other case study I just wanted to give you was around humanising data and connecting people to policy. So this is designing content for community engagement, which is effectively everything we do at the Nook when we're not trying to be open about money flows. So often governments have to go out to, they have a plan, they want to do a whole bunch of infrastructure for the next 40 years. And so they have all these plans that they have to go out to communities with and expect people to provide feedback on these things, because they want to make sure that people are on board because they're politicians. And often what they've done is they've taken an evidence base that's from something, who knows what, and they've made all these decisions and they want to justify and validate them. Often these are made in PowerPoint, Microsoft Word documents that are hundreds and hundreds of pages long. So a lot of what we do is helping make sense of that and try and bring together, you know, a whole bunch of different information in a way where they get the glossies that they need, which is everyone wants something on paper, and there's good reason for that because not everyone has access to digital. But you know, there's this thing where everything's designed in InDesign and they want the PDF. And so what's happening now is, of course, when you're doing this, you actually have to make the digital thing at the same time. Like, it's not like you can do we're just going to do the PDF and it'll get out there and we'll digitize it. Like, we really have to, that whole workflow needs to just be really super fast because like ministers and premiers and prime ministers are kind of taking a deadline away from you and going, we've got to get it out. And you were constantly trying to find ways to take something that needs to be print into digital. And the other way is taking digital into print, but that's a whole other story. So at the beginning of this project, we were told, yeah, there's probably about, 50 kind of elements, content assets that you need. We ended up developing over 700. So that was over 3 phases of the project, which was the kind of community engagement piece, and then it was the sort of like draft plans, and it was a pretty massive project. Often what we're doing is telling the data story, mapping with policy, explaining what planners do, the whole kind of thinking around the thing, and then creating content where we can have a call to action to get people back to the thing that we want them to do, which is actually contribute some ideas. So Future Transport was awesome because we really got to cut our teeth in terms of this is what content design really is. It's not just something that actually sits, you know, on a document.
Whether you're from Cootamundra, Coffs or Cobar, we all rely on transport. You might be a festival goer, or taking kids to the footy. Maybe you're a farmer taking your produce to market. Whoever you are, improving future connections between our local towns and regions matters. And you can help by sharing your views on what's important to you. Help us design tomorrow. Visit the Future Transport website today.
That's why content design is a team effort, because I can't do that stuff. There's all the other stuff that I do, but I have like artists and animators and, you know, wonderful people to help me bring all of this stuff to life. So much of what we do is actually map making. And it's not just, like I said, it's beyond the words. It's like most of the stuff and decisions and what's happening around us is map making. So as a content designer, knowing how to make maps, how to make them accessible, how to make them interactive, all the rest of it, and you know what it means to, what do you need to make maps a bit more meaningful. For example, this is a very technical map of, you know, what they call the city shaping network of what New Sydney is going to look like in 2056, and you kind of go, I have no idea what that means. Put that over the top, and you go, oh yeah, we've got where we are. There's Parramatta, and then there's this whole thing called the Western Parkland City. Like, that's the vision. So that's the technical map that sits under that, and this is what we call the story map or the policy map, the thing that sits over the top of it that helps tell that story. So they're the case studies, and I guess there's a really fantastic team, and I'm really grateful for the team that have worked on that and on the projects that we have. And I generally, at the Nook, we bring in who we need at different times. So I'm like a proper theatre film producer. Like I, you know, moved into service design, content design. It's, you know, I have my core team of people who I always work with, and we're always open to new ideas, new people, new skills, and particularly like data analysts and data scientists is kind of really sort of our bag at the moment because we're doing so much data work. The other piece of work that we're doing at the moment is doing a lot of explainers around open government and what it means, and to help advocates all over the world kind of advocate with their governments and advocate with private sector about openness and transparency and why it's important, and also how to do it. It's the kind of the how-tos. So I'm just going to talk a little minute about sort of like our sort of, I mean, service design, content design, for me, it's kind of same, different. It's just really the same thing. And I'm sure you've seen these circles before. And I think the thing that really, the thing that I cannot just emphasise enough is gathering your content and your data first. Before you go and talk to people, just get your data and get your content. When we were making Common Ground, it took us 1.5 years to get our data from our own department. We had other departments back then when none of them were talking to each other and they had no idea what collaboration meant, giving us data before our own department did. And it was a really big, it just took a long time. And that's why a lot of projects really happen and get quite delayed. So generally what we do is we have the kind of what we call the pre-design stage, which is when you're sort of doing that sort of understanding the objectives, the audiences, your stakeholders, and getting to know people. And then, really doing your political and social context, and then also looking at your content and your data and gathering that. So that's, you're always your content and your data is going to take forever. You just have to start at day one. Like, that's the most important thing that you can do. And then we go into the traditional kind of discovery phase, the development, the production, and then there's a continuous improvement. So that's, and participation for us happens at every different step. Like, every step, there's always people involved in terms of getting involved. So I just want to touch on the kind of government way of doing things. And I love the digital transformation. I love all of the GDS and what the DTA are doing. And I guess my biggest concern about this is there isn't that pre-stage. Like, everyone just jumps in discovery and goes, oh, just go and talk to people. And often what they're doing is actually making transactional services. They're not thinking about information services. And whenever you talk to people in government, they're like, oh, we just don't need pictures. We need the words. You're like, well, but no one's going to engage with just the words. It's like the thing that we do is like, it needs the magic. It needs that connectivity. It needs the story. And you want to be getting people to kind of come back and engage with your work. So therefore, that kind of, you do need sort of visual language, a visual language that goes with that. So I'm just going to talk to you about the content crisis, because this is usually where the Nook comes in. And so the content crisis is someone's decided they need to make a product or a digital something, and then they have to go through a procurement process, or, if you're doing an internal thing, they don't have to do that. They go through the build, they go to do some research, someone might think about the content. They do an engagement and release plan, and then they might spend $600,000 on a social media, like advertising. No one knows where the content's coming from, because I haven't thought about that yet. And then you kind of get to this testing, because they're kind of using a bit of dummy content, that's all cool. And then you get to that point where they go, hey, so where's the content? Like, who are our audience and what do we need them to do? And that's usually the time when we get the call. And it's probably about like kind of 10 weeks, 13 weeks between launch, when someone kind of figures it out that actually this is a really big problem. So we get our boots on, get in there, get it done, get to publish. They get it out there. It's kind of awesome, not as awesome as it could be, because they could have, just got us in way earlier, like right at the beginning. And, they get a whole bunch of feedback from people, and then the funding stops because they're building websites and not building services. And that's a really, really big problem with the mentality of making something where you go, oh, it's just out there, it's all fine, no one needs to do anything, we just need to maintain it, as opposed to going, it's a living thing. This is a living thing, it's a service, is a living thing. It's all fine if you just want to get it out there, but actually most of the things we're making need to be living things. As an open government advocate, Open Government 101 is access to information. One of the biggest issues with governments right now is because they've got this workflow, they're not thinking about where the information goes, and so it's being lost in this digital age because nothing's on paper anymore, everything's going into digital. And so if you kind of go, oh, hey, who made that submission, and what was all that stuff, and what was the community sentiment around that? And you go, boom, try and find it, it's gone. And it's a really big problem with kind of transparency and accountability in the future. So one of the things that we whip this out when we're talking to people in government and go, information management, knowledge management is a really big deal. This is when you need to get your information managers involved. Like, get them in really early so you know like what their needs are, and you're designing something where you can get the outputs that they need to be able to put into the, the state archive, the national archive, or wherever it is that they need to put it. So on that is this is my little open government, how to improve services tap dance that we do, which is the I before the T, really rethinking product and information service design. So much of it is about, oh, we've got a thing, like is it a game? Is it a digital product? Oh, it's an IT thing. Oh no, it's an information service, it's an app, it's whatever. And it is heavily technology. Like, people just go for the tech first. And you've got a whole bunch of IT people, like, anyway, you know the scenario. And information is kind of this thing where you go, oh yeah, we kind of need that, but like, we don't really. And I kind of think there's a reason why the I is before the T. So we're definitely content first people at the Nook. And it's also, in order to do really great research with audiences, it's actually really understanding your content, your data and your information and what it is you want from people. Like, what do you know, what do you need to know is really important. And obviously the content strategy piece, and then there's also the content design. And then everything's perfectly balanced because you're always making with people as well. So it's also that whole thing of making services with people, for people, with people, and making sure that they're involved all the way. And not everything has to be digital. This whole focus on digital transformation is really leaving a lot of people behind in communities who don't have technology or access to the digital thing that you think they do. And so that was one of the biggest lessons for us. We always do stuff in print. We always do stuff like where people can touch it and put it up on a wall, and as well as have the online. Because it's really important to be able to service that, but it's also a really great way to kind of get the word out about what you're doing and to make sure that people have got things that they can draw on, or, in terms of the process pathways, they're conflict deterrents. People put them on the table, they have a conversation about it. So coming back to sort of the things I love about the GDS, which is, they really championed content before anyone else really did, because it was the thing when they started doing their transformation. They were like, oh yeah, this is a thing we should really pay attention to. We don't really use the word users at the Nook. There's a lot of other words like audiences, participants. If you're a transactional service, yes, maybe you're a user, but we have a tendency to, it's like content is the experience. It's not just the user experience, it's the experience. Whether you're online, offline, whatever it is that you're doing, story is everything. And services don't work without content. So, that's the other clear message from the GDS, which, bless them, love them for that. I can say the government said that. It's just no one really is embracing it in the scale that we really need them to, and we'd love to get some more on board. These are some of my favourite books. They're written by some awesome people who are like just beautiful, wonderful crafts people, and there's a whole bunch of different resources out there, but these are the ones that are kind of always, when someone comes to the Nook, I'm like, okay, go to our library, and these are the top choices. And if anyone hasn't read Emergence, it's awesome, and if you're dealing with product design, service design, software design, it's a really fantastic, beautiful book to read. And my name's missing from there, I have no idea why that happened, but thank you, everyone.
Yes, speaking of digital experiences, there it is. So I got an e-pad, and if you lose the pencil, you're screwed. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks.
I have some questions stored up, but I have a feeling there's going to be a handful of questions at the ready out there, and I don't have to pull any out from my box of questions. Does anyone have a question for Mel? Oh, there we go.
Mel, really love your presentation, really enlightening, especially on Thursday night. And my question is that from your contents, to me, it's like you're really making complex information into a easy manner to understand. Obviously, we know there's another stream of people doing that, which is management consulting, and you are sort of in the content design or user experience. How would you say the key difference that what you're doing and management consulting? Because in essence, you're all making complex information into simple format, and management consulting doing in PowerPoint, but you're doing it in a different way. What are your thoughts?
I think thank you for asking that question. We often get called consultants, and we're not, because we're makers, and we're very collaborative. So what we do is, we're creating work that gets out there that's across different platforms. Management consultants or consultants come in and kind of go, hey, you should do this, or you should do that. We're actually boots in, working with, building capabilities, capacity, just getting stuff done along the way. And we're always thinking about cross-platform. So whether it be interactive, animation, like wherever people are. So it's really engagement. Yes, it's the transparency piece, it's that interpretation, but we're collaborators. And we're often we're often kind of left to our own devices, actually, because people get into a point where they're in a real stick and they don't have a creative director, they don't have a content director, they just don't actually have the roles that they need to make something, and they get to the end and they just get into a really big panic. And so we can just kind of come in and help. But I guess the biggest point of difference is we're not telling people what to do, we're actually working with them to help them and actually doing the doing. And that's the difference between a strategist, which is obviously strategists are doing the research and doing some work as well and delivering something that someone needs to deliver on, but we're the ones who are actually doing the doing. Thank you.
Everyone's over there.
Hi Mel, thanks for the talk. I was just curious to know, how do you test your new content? Who do you test it with? And what are your measures for testing the new content to ensure it's readable?
Thank you. So sometimes we're able to, so on Common Ground, for example, that was like a year and a half. So we were constantly bringing people into, where you saw that us on like the walls doing must, should, coulds. That was our little kind of lo-fi pop-up for Common Ground, because we wanted somewhere that was really safe and comfortable for people to come in, because it was a government project. We didn't want them going to a government office. And so we were above a cafe called Fleetwood Macchiato on Erskineville Road for 3 years during the making of that project. And it was a safe place, neutral place for people to come and just kind of like look at just do that kind of iterative test, look at what we were doing, ask questions, us then adapting the content and obviously the experience to meet their needs. So it was there was a lot of toing and froing on that, and there was a lot of sharing. And for us around that, it was really about like, there's one thing about sort of making the data understandable, but it was like, what is the information that people need to understand, and what do they need to make informed decisions? And like, who do they need to go to, and what are their rights, really? What are their rights? Because that was the thing that was really hard to kind of disseminate out of the sort of like the kind of the government information. On transport, we were on, there was, like I said, 3 different phases, and it was kind of over a year and a half. So often what we're doing is going in and doing chunks, and we're often working with, on transport, there was like 6, 7 other service providers who had been out doing like a website and games and surveys and interactives and data visualizations. There was no consistency at all across like look, feel, voice, tone. So I kind of came in and went, like, actually, you want us to do like the narrative. You actually need you need some sort of creative direction. So I'm kind of often going in and doing that sort of role. And then, so what we had on that was we had the 3 stages, which was stuff out going on the web, the first draft plan and the second. And we were able to do a little bit of testing. We weren't able to do the research that we wanted because we got like really boots on last minute. But, you know, that animation got 20,000 views, and that was the most that Transport had ever had. And so they were really thrilled with that because it brought people back to the website, which is where the submissions were being taken. And so for me, that's a good measure. Even though we weren't able to do the research, the fact that that was being viewed so much. And I mean, we finished working on that in 2018, and the department is still using that content internally across the board, and it's really well used. And it's like, you know, we designed it for PowerPoints, we designed it for, you know, there's animations galore, moving, you know, lots of motion. And the wonderful thing about that was what we did was we handed over the design element library at the end, because we were like, we don't want to lock in, we've done the work, move on, I've got other things to do with my life. And so handed in over the 700 elements and all the different like teeny tiny bits. And what's so beautiful on a project like that is being able to go, oh, like 3 years later, they've just done like a 3-minute video using all of our elements to tell the, you know, the 10-year plan blueprint for Sydney or New South Wales. And they're using all of those elements that we created. Like, it's really, you know, it's the usefulness and the extendability, and there's obviously a connectivity to it because that's survived as long as it has. I guess same with Common Ground. It's been out there for 6 years. It looks as fresh as the day we made it. Doesn't really feel like it's dated. Like, some of it's gone a bit backwards, but most of the time, you know, it's still there and it's still well used. But thank you.
Oh, someone from this end over here.
Hey. I was just wondering, what do you do about content, delivering content to, say, communities, remote communities, especially coming from government, for those communities that probably don't have a lot of trust for where the content's coming from, or even have, the interest in sort of, say, remote Aboriginal communities, for example?
Great question, and I don't know the answer to that one really, other than the work that we're doing now around open government that's our target, because they're those communities who really need our help and who want the information, and something like a common ground, it's not really going to be fit for purpose for them because they're traditional landowners and they've got a whole bunch of different needs, and someone just coming in and kind of going, hey, I live in this area and what's happening around me, it's much more, it's a bigger deal, or not a bigger deal, but there's a lot of other complexity that is, and often when mining companies are going into those areas, or infrastructure companies, they're going in quite early to have those conversations. So it's kind of, so it's a different design paradigm. But I guess the thing for us, and we're just about to go through some research with, there's a lot of work we do is around extractive industries and infrastructure, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do transport, because I wanted to use infrastructure data. I mean, aside from make some pretty pictures, but kind of get stuff out there, I really wanted to play with their data, because mining and production and infrastructure are like, these two things are together. Just the extraction bits, there's always infrastructure. So that, I guess, we're just about to do a whole bunch of work with the extractive industries kind of in transparency, and so we'll be able to test that out. But yeah, I guess it's always having something that's on paper is also really important. And whenever I travel a lot around the world talking about open government and also talking about design and bringing data to life and storytelling in that kind of open government sphere. And a lot of we get out of Africa and Asia is the fact that you have something that you can hold and put on the table that's a conflict deterrent that someone can talk to. It just, it's a really powerful thing. So I think that's kind of where we're headed.
Thank you.
Hi, Mel. Thank you so much for the presentation. So I'm curious to get your view in the world of product design, kind of how content design can take a role. So in the past few years, there's the emergence of UX writers or other roles like technical writers in the world of product design. And as a product designer now, I kind of take on some of that, I guess, work where, you would write copy and then you work with the copywriters as a localization team to kind of distribute that across different markets. But I'm curious, in your experience, kind of what is the ideal structure to kind of help promote and advocate for that type of content design where, it's consistent for your brand and it would come through in all different touch points of the experience?
I would say send them their talk after. I think, in my deep, dark past when I was working in visual effects and animation, so I actually make products, like tools. Like productivity tools are kind of my happy place. Yeah, information services love them, but at their core, they're kind of productivity tools, really. I mean, look at Common Ground or the process pathway maker that we're making and what we're doing with Common Ground 2.0. It's how you connect people to the product, and it's voice, tone, it's having that consistency, it's being able to test it, and also, I mean, what we generally do is always, whenever we're going in and working with someone, we always go, okay, so the people have their brand style guides. We will generally create a content style guide for people. So there's the brand stuff and there's all that stuff that you do when you want to sell something and the selly thing, which is not what we do. And so for us, it's really around that consistency of tone, visual language, and having all of that stuff mapped out. And so it kind of has a different purpose, and that's something that evolves over time, whereas your brand document often is something that, kind of doesn't really get updated, even though it should. So that lexicon is actually really important, and that plain language and understanding the tone and just having, because it's the personality, right? And that's, whether that's in the way that you look or the way that you speak or the way that you sound, I guess that's really that is the product. And that's one of the things that, coming from a theatre and film background, I'm a producer. I mean, we're all producers, product designers, we're producers. you know, having that sort of story and making sure that there's a way to follow that story and follow those threads. I don't know how to sell that to your boss, but, you know, using that language around that, you know, it's a living thing that everyone should be a part of, and so therefore you should have the guides and get someone in to kind of create that for you and coach some people and do some co-writing, do that capability, you know, the capacity building, capability building, and just kind of share the voice and share the tone, I think is probably a really good way to do it. Rather than expecting people to do it themselves, get someone in to come and buddy with people, I think is a really great way to do it, and that's generally what we do in government.
Thanks, Mel. I think that's, I'm sure there's more, but Mel's coming downstairs for a drink afterwards.
Yep.
And I hope others
Thanks, everyone.
are.